Number HOA Karen called cops after my wife moved in, then froze when she saw her military ID. Number opening hook. The sound of sirens approaching Pinewood Drive sent my stomach plummeting into free fall. Two squad cars rounded the corner with lights flashing, but sirens mercifully quiet. Apparently recognizing this wasn't exactly a high-priority emergency, through our living room window, I watched my neighbor Victoria Palmer position herself prominently among the gathering crowd, clearly relishing her role as the community spokesperson who'd courageously called for backup. Officers, thank God you're here. Victoria's performance was Academy Award worthy, as she gestured dramatically toward our house like she was identifying a crime scene. These people have been threatening our peaceful community. The woman claims to be military, but has absolutely no proof. My hands were shaking as Chief Martinez stepped out of the first car. A weathered man in his 50s who looked like he'd seen every variety of human stupidity the job had to offer. This was insane. We'd done absolutely nothing wrong, yet somehow I felt like a criminal waiting for execution. But Morgan remained completely calm, putting on her shoes with deliberate precision, completely unfazed by the police presence outside our door. When Chief Martinez requested identification from both of us, Morgan moved with military bearing, reaching for her back pocket slowly, deliberately, like she had all the time in the world. The crowd held its collective breath as she withdrew a single card and held it up to catch the morning sunlight. The military ID gleamed like a beacon, the silver eagle practically glowing in the light. Colonel Morgan Swift, United States Army. Victoria's transformation was a masterpiece of human emotion frozen in time. Her confident smile cracked and crumbled as understanding crept in, the color draining from her face like someone had pulled a plug. She stood there like a mannequin, mouth hanging open, eyes wide with shock. The woman who'd been so confident in her authority had just discovered she'd called the police on a colonel in the United States Army. Number, background and setup. Let me back up and explain how we got to this surreal moment of neighborhood warfare. After 2 years of long-distance marriage, my wife Morgan was finally coming home. I'd spent months preparing for this day, transforming our modest house on Pinewood Drive into the perfect homecoming sanctuary. The neighborhood was quiet, well-maintained, and governed by what seemed like reasonable HOA guidelines. I thought this would be the happiest day of my life. Morgan and I met during her deployment to Germany, where I was working as a civilian contractor for the Department of Defense. She was a rising star in Army logistics, already a lieutenant colonel at 34, with 8 years of exemplary service. When she received orders stateside, we finally had the chance to build a real life together. I'd purchased our house 18 months earlier, a charming 2-story colonial with mature landscaping and a 2-car garage. The neighborhood association seemed professional and reasonable during the buying process. Property values were stable. The community was well maintained, and the HOA fees were modest. What I didn't realize was that reasonable guidelines could become weapons in the wrong hands. Victoria Palmer lived 3 houses down from us, and I'd seen her around the neighborhood during my first year as a resident. She was always perfectly dressed, always carrying a clipboard, always finding something to inspect or discuss with other neighbors. At 52, she'd appointed herself the unofficial enforcer of community standards, though her actual authority extended only to filing complaints and hosting monthly coffee meetings for concerned residents. Victoria had emigrated from Canada 15 years earlier and seemed determined to prove her American citizenship through aggressive patriotism and community involvement. She displayed multiple flags on her property, organized 4th of July block parties, and never missed an opportunity to lecture neighbors about property values and community pride. The morning Morgan arrived, I stood at our window checking my watch every 30 seconds like some lovesick teenager. The house was spotless after 3 days of obsessive cleaning. Fresh flowers adorned the dining table, and a welcome home banner hung proudly across our front porch. Everything had to be perfect for Morgan's homecoming. When that big olive green military truck turned the corner and pulled into our driveway, I couldn't stop grinning. Morgan stepped out like she owned the world, moving with the confident efficiency that comes from commanding troops in combat zones. At 34, she carried herself with natural authority, every gesture calculated and purposeful, but I noticed how her eyes kept scanning our surroundings even as she smiled at my banner. Old habits from deployments, she always said. Her laugh was warm as she gestured to my elaborate welcome display, but there was something alert in her posture that I'd learned to recognize. She was always watching, always analyzing. That's when the storm arrived in the form of Victoria Palmer. Number, the escalation. The sound of Victoria's front door slamming shut echoed across the quiet street like a gunshot. She marched out of her house with the determination of a general leading troops into battle, her phone already in hand, eyes locked on our military truck, like a predator spotting wounded prey. Victoria speed-walked toward us with focused intensity, her fingers flying across her phone screen, taking photos from multiple angles like some kind of investigative journalist. She posted immediately to the neighborhood group chat, typing military invasion of our peaceful community with practiced efficiency. Excuse me. Victoria's voice cut through the peaceful afternoon air like a rusty knife. I'm Victoria Palmer, HOA compliance officer for this community. That vehicle is in direct violation of Section 3B of our community guidelines. No commercial vehicles are permitted to park on residential streets for more than 30 minutes. She didn't bother with pleasantries or introductions, just straight into attack mode. I tried to explain diplomatically, "Ma'am, this is my wife Morgan. She's just moving her things from base housing." But Victoria cut me off with buzzsaw efficiency. I don't care who she claims to be. Rules are rules. And another thing, I've checked our military databases. There's no record of any active duty personnel registered at this address. Morgan's reaction was fascinating to watch. Where I was getting flustered and defensive, she remained completely calm, almost amused by Victoria's performance. She didn't speak immediately, just observed Victoria like a scientist, studying an interesting specimen. This neighborhood has standards. Victoria's voice rose an octave, drawing curious neighbors to their windows. I've maintained property values here for 12 years. I won't let some fake army wife and her pushover husband destroy what I've built. The way she said fake army wife made my blood boil. But Morgan just tilted her head slightly, like Victoria had said something mildly interesting. Victoria was pulling out all the stops now, establishing her territory with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. She called the HOA hotline right there on our driveway, speaking loudly enough for the entire street to hear. Emergency violation in progress. Military vehicle. Possible fraud situation. Yes. I'll document everything for the official report. Then came Victoria's power display, her greatest hits compilation of neighborhood victories. I've handled 6 other problem families in this community. The Johnsons moved after 3 months of proper enforcement. The Garcias couldn't handle the pressure of maintaining community standards. She rattled off her statistics like battle victories. 23 successful violations processed this year alone. I am the law in this neighborhood. Morgan finally spoke, her voice steady as steel. Ma'am, you seem very thorough. Tell me, do you know what real authority looks like? The question hung in the air like a challenge, delivered with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from actually holding power rather than just pretending to wield it. Victoria scoffed with the arrogance of someone who'd never encountered genuine authority. Honey, I've been dealing with troublemakers since before you were born. This is my neighborhood, and these are my rules. Morgan's smile grew just a fraction wider, and there was something almost predatory in it. I'm sure you have been dealing with troublemakers. Very interesting. That evening, Victoria delivered her ultimate threat, storming off but turning back to shout loud enough for the entire street to hear, "Tomorrow morning, I'm calling the police. We'll see how fake your military story is then." As she retreated, Morgan quietly took out her phone and photographed Victoria mid-rant, capturing her red face and pointing finger in perfect detail. When I asked why she was taking pictures, Morgan's response was simple but loaded with implications. Evidence. Sweetheart, always collect evidence. The counterattack began the next day, and it was nothing short of breathtaking in its scope and vindictiveness. I came home from work to find 4 official violation notices taped to our front door like some kind of bureaucratic declaration of war. Excessive noise complaint. 6. 15 am. Disturbance, documented by multiple witnesses. Read the first one. Apparently referring to Morgan's morning workout routine. Vehicle positioning violation. Personal automobile extends 2-3 inches beyond approved property line. Declared the second. Targeting my car that I'd parked the same way for months without incident. Unauthorized signage display. Welcome home banner installed, without proper HOA approval. Stated the third. Attacking the decoration I'd hung with such joy. Landscaping non-compliance. Hedge height exceeds 42-inch maximum by approximately 1 inch. Claimed the fourth. Targeting bushes that had been professionally trimmed 2 weeks ago. Each violation carried an $85 fine. And Victoria had managed to rack up 10 of them in just 2 days. $850 for completely fabricated infractions. The financial pressure was clearly calculated to force compliance through economic warfare, but the monetary attacks were just the beginning of Victoria's sophisticated harassment campaign. She began following Morgan during her morning runs, documenting every step with her phone camera. She positioned her car to block our driveway exit, forcing me to ask her to move every time I needed to leave for work. At exactly 11 p.m. each night, loud music would begin blasting from Victoria's house, stopping precisely at 10:59. Just 1 minute before the noise ordinance took effect. The psychological warfare escalated into something approaching stalking behavior. Victoria would stand in her yard for hours, staring at our house with surveillance, operative intensity. She took flash photos through our windows at night, claiming she was documenting suspicious activity. Passive-aggressive notes began appearing on our car windshield. Some people think rules don't apply to them, and community standards exist for a reason. The constant pressure was taking its toll, especially on me. I wasn't sleeping, jumping at every sound, checking our locks obsessively like we were under siege. The financial anxiety was eating me alive. "Morgan," I said one evening, staring at the latest batch of violation notices, "maybe we should just comply, pay the fines, and keep our heads down. Maybe if we show we're willing to follow their rules, she'll leave us alone." But even as I said it, I knew how it sounded. Like surrender. Like letting the bully win. Number. The preparation. Morgan looked at me with something between disappointment and understanding. "You can choose to live in fear, Ryan. But I spent 8 years overseas defending our freedoms. I'm not about to surrender them to a suburban dictator." That night, as I lay awake, listening to Victoria's precisely timed music assault, I realized I was becoming exactly what she wanted. Broken. Compliant. Defeated. The next morning, I watched Morgan open her laptop and create a new folder on her desktop. The name made me smile for the first time in days. Operation Neighborhood Peace. She began photographing everything with military precision. Victoria's car, parked illegally, near fire hydrants. Her dog running off-leash in violation of city ordinances. Her own violations of the noise restrictions she was using against us. Rule number 1 of warfare. Morgan explained as she documented Victoria's hypocrisy with systematic efficiency. Know your enemy better than they know themselves. And Victoria Palmer is about to discover what real strategy looks like. Morgan spent the next week conducting what she called intelligence gathering. She researched property law, HOA regulations, and civil rights statutes. She contacted the base legal office for consultation about harassment of military personnel. She documented every violation notice with timestamps and photographs. But Morgan's real breakthrough came when she started investigating Victoria's background. Public records showed interesting discrepancies in Victoria's claims about her community involvement. Property tax records revealed Victoria had received multiple violations herself over the years, all mysteriously dismissed without fines. Most importantly, Morgan discovered that Victoria had been filing false complaints against neighbors for over a decade. The Johnsons, the Garcias, and 4 other families had all been driven away by Victoria's systematic harassment campaigns. Morgan also uncovered Victoria's biggest vulnerability: her immigration status. Victoria had been claiming veteran preference benefits despite never serving in any military, a federal crime that could result in deportation proceedings. Ryan, Morgan said one evening, closing her laptop with satisfaction, Victoria Palmer has made 2 critical mistakes. First, she picked a fight with someone who actually understands how authority works. Second, she's been committing federal fraud for 15 years. And now she's drawn attention to herself. The final piece of Morgan's preparation involved a single phone call to Chief Martinez, not to file a complaint, but to provide a professional courtesy notification that a decorated military officer had taken residence in his jurisdiction and might be targeted for harassment due to anti-military bias. I just want to ensure proper protocols are followed if anyone attempts to weaponize your department against military personnel. Morgan explained professionally. Chief Martinez assured her that his department took military harassment seriously and would investigate any complaints thoroughly. What he didn't mention was that he'd already received 17 calls from Victoria Palmer in the past month, most of them frivolous or obviously fabricated. Number. The climax and execution. Victoria Palmer was a woman of her word, because at exactly 6 a.m. the next morning, she was on the phone with 911. I know this because our bedroom window faces her house, and I could hear her pacing on her front porch, speaking loudly enough to wake half the neighborhood. I need to report suspicious individuals in our community, she declared with the gravity of someone reporting international espionage. Military vehicle. Possible stolen valor situation. Could potentially be dangerous to our families. But Victoria wasn't content with just emergency services. I watched through our blinds as she systematically contacted multiple agencies. The tax office claiming we might be avoiding vehicle registration fees. The fire department suggesting our military equipment might be a safety hazard. Her recruitment campaign was even more impressive. Victoria went door to door like a political candidate, building a coalition of fear for everyone's safety. We need to document this properly. They could be anyone. Identity thieves. Criminals. Who knows what kind of people we're dealing with? She was spreading rumors with propaganda machine efficiency, poisoning the well before we even had a chance to introduce ourselves properly. Military people often have PTSD. Could be dangerous to have them around families. You never know when they might snap. When the police arrived, Victoria positioned herself as the community spokesperson, greeting Chief Martinez and Officer Thompson with practiced familiarity. Officers, thank God you're here. These people have been threatening our peaceful community. The crowd's attention was electric as Victoria delivered her Academy Award-worthy performance, but when Chief Martinez requested identification, Morgan moved with deliberate precision, reaching for her wallet with the calm confidence of someone who held all the cards. The military ID gleamed in the morning sunlight, the silver eagle practically glowing. Colonel Morgan Swift, United States Army. The silence that followed was so complete, you could have heard a pin drop on concrete. Victoria's transformation was a masterpiece of human emotion frozen in time. Second one, her confident smile still plastered across her face. Second two, her eyes focusing on the ID card, trying to process what she was seeing. Second three, the smile beginning to waver as understanding crept in. Second four, her jaw starting to drop in slow motion. Second five, the color draining from her face like someone had pulled a plug. Chief Martinez's reaction was immediate and dramatic. His entire posture changed as he recognized the rank and credentials. Colonel Swift, my sincere apologies. Ma'am, had I known we were dealing with military personnel of your caliber. Both officers snapped to attention with crisp military bearing, offering sharp salutes that spoke of deep respect for Morgan's rank and service. The contrast with Victoria's continued frozen state was almost comical. Should we file a report about false emergency calls? Chief, Officer Thompson asked quietly. The implications were clear. Victoria had wasted valuable police resources on a bogus complaint. The crowd's reaction rippled through the gathered neighbors like a shockwave. Holy crap! Did you see that? Victoria just called the cops on a colonel. Is she completely insane? Victoria tried to recover, stammering something about fake identification and military people being capable of deception. But her voice had lost all its earlier authority. Chief Martinez shut down her protests with professional firmness. Ma'am, this is legitimate federal identification. I strongly suggest you reconsider the nature of your complaints. As the police prepared to leave, Chief Martinez made a comment that would prove prophetic. He spoke quietly to Officer Thompson, but his words carried clearly in the morning air. Make a note about this address and keep an eye on Palmer. People like her don't stop. Victoria heard every word, and I watched her face go from red with embarrassment to white with sudden fear. She'd gone from being the authority figure to being the one under scrutiny. Number, the resolution and justice. For 3 days after the police incident, Victoria Palmer's house remained ominously quiet. The silence should have been comforting, but somehow it felt more threatening than her previous theatrics. Through our bedroom window, I watched her silhouette at her computer desk for hours at a time, the glow of her monitor casting eerie patterns on her walls. When someone like Victoria Palmer goes quiet, it's not because they've given up. It's because they're regrouping. The counterattack began on day 4 with breathtaking vindictiveness. 4 more violation notices appeared on our door, each more ridiculous than the last. But this time, Morgan was ready. She'd spent those 3 days conducting her own investigation, and what she discovered was devastating. Victoria had been systematically defrauding the HOA for years, processing her own complaints with priority treatment while delaying legitimate concerns from other neighbors. More damaging still, Morgan uncovered Victoria's false veteran benefits claims. Tax records showed Victoria had been receiving military spouse benefits despite never being married to service member, and claiming veteran preference for federal employment despite never serving. The emergency HOA meeting Victoria demanded became her public execution. What we're dealing with here, Victoria began with theatrical confidence, is a clear case of systematic intimidation by individuals who believe military service gives them special privileges above community standards. She opened her briefcase with theatrical precision, revealing meticulously organized folders, printed photographs, and official-looking documents. But when Morgan stood to respond, carrying nothing but a simple manila folder, the contrast was striking. Substance versus show. Mrs. Palmer has made serious accusations about our character and compliance with community standards. Morgan began with calm authority. I believe in facts rather than emotions, in evidence rather than innuendo. So let me share some documented facts with this assembly. Morgan connected her laptop to the room's projection system, and began systematically dismantling Victoria's case with military briefing efficiency. Evidence Package 1. Video documentation of actual rule violations. The first video showed Victoria, clearly identifiable, dumping her household trash into our bin at 5:47 a.m. Gasps rippled through the audience as they watched their self-appointed rule enforcer breaking the very regulations she claimed to protect. Evidence Package 2. Documentation fraud and witness manipulation. Morgan displayed proof that Victoria's multiple witness statements had come from exactly two people, both close personal friends who'd never actually witnessed the alleged incidents. Evidence Package 3. Systematic harassment and stalking behavior. Phone logs showed Victoria had called Morgan's workplace 6 times in 2 weeks. 47 photographs had been taken of our property from public areas. Multiple neighbors' security cameras had captured Victoria following Morgan during morning runs. The room dynamic shifted like a tectonic plate movement. Whispers started in the back rows and spread forward. I didn't know she was taking pictures of my house, too. 47 photos. That's basically stalking. Evidence Package 4. Financial manipulation and selective enforcement. Morgan displayed a comprehensive comparison chart showing 18 violations issued to our household in 14 days, compared to 3 violations for the entire rest of the neighborhood during the same period. But Morgan's killing blow was the federal fraud evidence. Phone records show Mrs. Palmer has been claiming veteran benefits for 15 years, despite never serving in any military branch. This is federal fraud, punishable by deportation for non-citizens. Victoria's desperation was beautiful to watch. She stood up abruptly, her professional facade cracking like cheap paint. This is character assassination. They're using military intimidation tactics. She actually tried to rush the projector, as if destroying the evidence would make the truth disappear. When 2 board members restrained her true nature finally emerged. I am the law in this neighborhood. You can't do this to me. The board's 10-minute deliberation felt like 10 hours, but their decision was swift and comprehensive. All violations against us were dismissed as frivolous and unsupported by evidence. Victoria was fined $500 for systematic abuse of the community complaints system. Most importantly, the board announced new policies requiring corroborating evidence from unrelated sources for all future complaints effectively, the Victoria Palmer Rule, though they were too polite to call it that officially. But the real justice came 2 weeks later, when federal investigators arrived at Victoria's door with deportation papers. Her decade and a half of benefit fraud had finally caught up with her. Triggered by Morgan's professional courtesy report to the appropriate authorities, the irony was absolutely perfect. Victoria Palmer, who'd weaponized law enforcement against innocent neighbors, was now being investigated by the very federal agencies she'd tried to manipulate. The woman who'd demanded documentation from everyone else couldn't provide legitimate documentation for her own claims. 6 months later, Victoria Palmer was deported back to Canada. Her citizenship application permanently denied due to federal fraud convictions. Her house sold for $40,000 below market value to cover legal fees and restitution. Our neighborhood finally experienced the peace Victoria had claimed to protect. Property values actually increased once her reign of terror ended, and neighbors began talking to each other again without fear of citation or harassment. The final twist came when we learned that Chief Martinez had been building a case against Victoria for months, documenting her pattern of false police reports and harassment of military families. Morgan's complaint had simply provided the federal nexus needed to trigger a comprehensive investigation. Today, Pinewood Drive is everything Victoria claimed to want: a peaceful, well-maintained community where neighbors respect each other and property values remain stable. The only difference is that real authority, not manufactured intimidation, now protects those standards. Sometimes justice isn't swift, but when it finally arrives, it's absolutely perfect. Victoria Palmer learned too late that there's a significant difference between having actual authority and simply pretending to wield it. She chose to pick a fight with someone who understood that difference intimately. The woman who terrorized innocent families with bureaucratic weapons discovered that real consequences exist for those who abuse the system. Her 15 minutes of neighborhood fame cost her citizenship, her home, and her freedom. Morgan still keeps Victoria's violation notices in a frame in our home office. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that bullies can only succeed when good people choose to remain silent. Sometimes standing up to tyranny requires patience, documentation, and the quiet confidence that comes from actually understanding how authority works. Our welcome home banner still hangs on our front porch. No longer a violation of community standards, but a symbol of what happens when justice finally prevails over petty neighborhood tyranny.